I find the geometry of a modern life very strange, how it can feel so vast in its potential, yet so claustrophobic in its daily execution. We live in a world of unprecedented access, staggering abundance, and yet we move through it like miners in a played out shaft, tapping the walls, hoping to hear the hollow sound of something real behind them. We solve many of the ancient, mortal problems. We have conquered hunger, disease, distance, and in the space we cleared, something quieter grew, a new kind of emptiness, almost like we spent thousands of years fighting to survive. And now that survival is easier, we're not entirely sure what to do with the silence that followed. Sometimes I wonder if we solved the problem of survival and accidentally created a crisis of meaning. This isn't really about blaming technology or modern life. I mean, I'm 24. I grew up with Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cracked phone screens. This world is the only one I've known. But sometimes I sit back and notice that, somewhere along the way, we turned life itself into a product. I read something online recently that stuck with me. We work ourselves to death just to buy back the life our ancestors had by default. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It dissolved in my mind like a bitter tonic, trying to trace its logic. Because if that line doesn't make you pause for a second, maybe you've already traded away more than you realized. I sit at a desk most of my days, stare at a screen, scroll, reply, produce. Then later I pay for a gym membership so I can simulate movement in a mirrored room. I pay extra for organic vegetables so I can taste something that hasn't been engineered for shelf life. It's a strange little loop. It's a terrible circular economy. My labor is no longer directly applied to my living. My effort goes into abstract work, that becomes abstract money. That currency is then spent in frantic, piecemeal transactions to reacquire fragments of the very wholeness my labor systematically dismantles. A dinner with friends, a quiet retreat, a walk somewhere without signal. Sometimes it feels like we're paid to slowly disassemble ourselves. And then we spend the weekend trying to put the pieces back together. We rent stillness. We subscribe to peace. We are both the machine and the mechanic. The sickness and the cure, selling our time to buy connection back. Little pieces of our own humanity. We sold embedded rhythm for scheduled optimization. Once upon a time, the day was more like a conversation with the world. You woke up because the sun arrived, not because an alarm bullied you into consciousness. The rooster was loud. The animals were hungry. The work was not a separate compartment labeled productivity. It was the ongoing dialogue of sustenance. Planting was a conversation with the soil and the season. Repairing a fence meant arguing with stubborn wood and unpredictable weather. The rhythm was set by external living systems. The sun's arc, the apple's readiness to fall, the cow reminding you it's breakfast time. There was fatigue, sure, a deep and bone-level tiredness. But it was a fatigue congruent with being. It made sense. You were tired from something, for something. Now my rhythm is mostly dictated by notifications. I wake to a shriek that has no relation to the sky. I perform tasks whose purpose is abstract, whose end product is often a spreadsheet, a data point, a line on a graph, or a report someone skims before the next meeting. The fatigue that follows is a cognitive static, a soul-deep confusion. It is the exhaustion of dissonance, less physical, more foggy. Like your mind worked all day, but your life didn't move anywhere. The Quran says, "And we made from water every living thing," which is a reminder that life moves in rhythms. Rivers flow, rain falls, seeds grow slowly, quietly, without productivity apps reminding them. Sometimes I wonder if humans were meant to move like that too, slow enough to notice the ground beneath us. We've optimized life so efficiently. It feels like we optimized the life right out of it. When I was a kid, I didn't need to schedule stillness. Now I have to write it into my daily schedule. 9 to 10 p.m., time to unwind. As if peace is a meeting I might miss. A friend of mine works a job he hates. He always says it's temporary. Just stacking money. just securing the future. But the future keeps moving. Every time he gets closer to it, it seems to take another step away. He's exhausted during the week, then spends Saturday trying to reset. Sunday night, the anxiety starts again. And listen, this isn't me romanticizing the past. I don't think our ancestors were floating around in some peaceful cottagecore fantasy. They had it rough. They struggled. They starved. They buried people too young. They lived shorter, harder lives. The past wasn't any better. It was crueler in so many ways. But it was embedded. Purpose wasn't something you searched for. It was the air in the lungs of the day. It was just there, in the dirt under your nails, in the weight of the wood you chopped, in the bread you baked, in the food you pulled from the ground. A farmer knew why he woke up, feeding his family and his community from the land he tended. A blacksmith knew who needed the horseshoe he was making, the hinge that would last a generation. Purpose was in the calloused hand, the satisfied ache, the tangible result of effort that would become part of the fabric of another's life. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "No one eats better food than that which he earns with his own hands." And I don't think that was just about money. I think it was about the dignity of seeing the connection between effort and outcome. You didn't need a motivational video or a morning routine to feel productive. You had to eat. You had to build. You had to show up. I read a comment from a 71-year-old man who grew up on a farm. He described the chill on the morning okra, not the idea of freshness, but the specific, tactile sensation of it in his hands. What he described wasn't a life free of work. It was a life where the pieces made sense together. The schedule was set by the weather. Rain was your boss. Your performance review was the yield of the land. Your stress was about frost or drought, immediate and tangible foes, not about nebulous quarterly projections or the shifting politics of a middle management hierarchy. And part of me felt jealous, not for the labor, but for the rhythm, because that might be the thing we quietly lost. These days, purpose feels like a search engine query, a product, something we're always looking for, but rarely arriving at. And peace has become its premium feature, an entire industry. It is a library of podcasts, a stack of self-help books, a career coach, a life hacking seminar. We've built a world that brilliantly sells us solutions to problems it created. We have outsourced the generation of meaning to a content industry that profits from our continued search, sold the idea that purpose is a destination to be reached through the right combination of achievements, rather than a quality of attention to be brought to whatever is in front of us. It's strange when you think about it. We breathe recycled air in office buildings so that we can someday afford a garden that smells like actual soil. We work jobs that drain our energy so we can afford the tools that promise to restore it. We sold inevitable connection for managed intimacy. Late at night, we scroll through glowing rectangles, looking for belonging. Not long ago, that same midnight might have been spent sitting around a fire or a kitchen table with people who work beside you all day. Connection used to be a condition of existence, not an achievement. You lived in a web of mutual necessity. The well was where you met and spoke. The harvest required many hands, and so became a feast. The front porch was a stage for the slow theater of community, where stories were passed like heirlooms and loneliness was a communal concern. Your survival was intertwined with the well-being of those around you in visible, direct ways. Now I send bulk texts of "How are you?" on a random Saturday while reheating my 2-minute noddles for a third time and half watching videos of football reviews for the same match I just watched an hour ago. And sometimes, even when someone answers that text honestly, I realize I don't quite have the energy to hold their pain or their excitement. And in that lies the real hunger, not for things, but for cadence, for the feeling that my small, ordinary life fits into something larger than my own ambitions. Connection is now a service I opt into, often for a fee. I schedule quality time weeks in advance, as if affection were a board meeting. I maintain relationships through the brittle, low bandwidth medium of text and curated image. I often feel lonely in a crowd, because the crowd is no longer a community with a shared fate, but an audience of fellow performers. We have thousands of contacts and no one to borrow a cup of sugar from. We have traded the deep, sometimes irritating, bond of mutual dependence for the clean, shallow freedom of total independence. And it turns out that independence can feel a little like solitary confinement. Stillness suffered the same fate. It was not something you did. Once it was simply the quiet space between actions. It was the restful pause after chopping wood, the quiet calm of a winter evening with only the crackle of the fire and the wind outside. It was built into the architecture of life, the seasonal lull, the natural end of daylight. Now, stillness is a commodity. It is a $15 per month subscription to an app that guides you on how to breathe. It is a weekend digital detox retreat that costs half a month's rent. It is a scented candle marketed as serenity in a jar. We have become so estranged from our own innate capacity for quiet that we must be sold instructions on how to achieve it and products to facilitate the process. We now pay to learn how to not want to buy things. And the crazy part? All of this is framed as convenience. But convenience slowly became captivity. The Quran reminds us once again, "Verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest," which requires no monthly payment, just attention. The sharp question eventually appears. What's the alternative? For most of us, it probably isn't buying a farm. Though I admit, some mornings that fantasy looks pretty convincing. But ultimately, I don't think it's about a location, rather, an orientation. I have a friend who's a handyman. He has no social media, no smartphone. He is a node in a human network, just tools and people who call him when things break. He fixes roofs, doors, fences, works just enough to pay his bills. Then he goes fishing, hiking, kayaking, or you find him training for the next marathon. The crucial detail is, he talks to people. His work is visible. His skills directly translate. His economy runs on reputation and trust, not algorithms. He carries almost no stress. Honestly, he looks younger than he is. Maybe because he carries no abstract debt, financial or psychic. His problems are tangible. A broken pipe, a leaking roof, or a squeaky door. Things you can actually fix with your hands. Another alternative I've been trying lately is to simply let alone. Thoreau said, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone." This is the inverse logic of our age. We're taught wealth means accumulating more. But maybe real wealth is not measured by what you can acquire, but by what you can confidently ignore. The latest model, the upgrade, the subscription, the trending destination, the next thing the internet says will make life complete. Understanding that new sneakers give you about 3 weeks of dopamine before they become just another pair. Then you want something else. It's not even greed. It's conditioning. Every time I ignore one of those signals, I've reclaimed a little territory. Not in the world, but in my mind. It is the space that is not colonized by desire, manufactured elsewhere. My rebellions haven't been dramatic. No grand speeches. Just small adjustments. Cooking a meal from scratch with ingredients I chose. With time I sacrificed and not posting about it. The act itself, the chopping, crying, the stirring, the waiting, is a reintegration. In that moment, I am no longer a consumer of calories. I am a participant in the ancient alchemy of transformation. The meal becomes an anchor in time, a sensory bookmark in the blur of the day. Leaving my phone behind on walks and realizing the world doesn't collapse if I go unseen for an hour or two. Moving without specific destination, and letting my mind be bored by the familiar scenery of my neighborhood. To notice the cracks in the pavement, the change in a garden, the face of the person who always walks their dog at this time. To reclaim my attention from curated stimulation and return it to the real world. practicing the lost art of witnessing my own life. Finally, learning my neighbor's name and the fact that their knee has been bothering them. To knock on their door, not just in emergency, but in fellowship. I am slowly rebuilding that web, one thread at a time, moving from networked isolation to actual neighborhood. Understanding that security does not come from an alarm system, but from a network of eyes and mutual care. Sitting quietly in my room without reaching for a device. Letting silence become not a void to be filled, but a presence to be felt. Allowing the thoughts that surface, the anxious, the trivial, the profound, to just be, without immediately outsourcing their management to a distraction. Training the muscle memory of being with myself. It is my foundation of peace that cannot be revoked by a subscription lapse. Valuing time over things, connection over consumption, depth over dopamine. None of it is glamorous, of course. There's no aesthetic to it. It doesn't fit neatly into a marketing campaign. And maybe that's the point. It's slow. It's quiet. It's so ordinary, it almost feels radical. The rain outside sounds different when you stop scrolling long enough to hear it. Not just water on glass, but the reminder that the world is still here, moving patiently beyond our glowing screens, still breathing, still waiting. And maybe the invitation isn't to go backwards, but simply to go deeper into the life that's already in front of us, one quiet choice at a time. Maybe the geometry of modern life will always feel a little strange, lines pulling us in too many directions, angles we don't quite understand yet. But maybe the goal isn't to solve the shape. Maybe it's just to keep walking inside it, slowly learning the rhythm of the lines. So wherever you are right now, driving, lying awake, or just sitting with your thoughts, I'm glad our paths crossed for a little while. Take care of your mind, guard your heart, and don't rush the questions that take a lifetime to answer. Until next time, peace be with you.